Here's the deal. There's this quote by Maya Angelou. It's people will forget what you do, they'll forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Will, I'm smiling. Welcome to the podcast. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to be with you again, man. And likewise, great to see you.
Yeah, it's just going to be a fun conversation, and I so enjoyed when we met actually last month. But we're going to just take a headlong dive in today, and I'd love to just start here, Will, if we could. I'd love for folks to hear just a bit of your backstory as it led to the success as the owner of the #1 restaurant in the world, 11 Madison Park. I mean, where did all of this start for you?
So, my career in hospitality, and I use that word intentionally. I'm in the restaurant business, but I was on a walk with a good friend of mine after I sold my company in early 2020 as I was kind of musing on what I wanted to do next. And he said, "Hey, are you in the restaurant business or the hospitality business?" And no one had ever asked me that before, but the answer was very clear to me that I'm in the hospitality business. I just happen to do that through serving people food. And that's kind of the big part of what I am trying to put out into the world, is that I believe any business can be in the hospitality business regardless of what product it serves. But I grew up in restaurants and hospitality. My mom was a flight attendant for American Airlines. My dad was a restaurateur. He ran a company called Restaurant Associates in New York, responsible for places like the food and beverage at Lincoln Center and the Met Opera and the restaurants at Rockefeller Center and a bunch of other places like that. My family faced a bit of adversity early in my life, where my mom got sick with brain cancer. Ultimately became a quadriplegic when I was young, which I mentioned for a couple of reasons. A, because, man, adversity, my dad always says, is a terrible thing to waste. And one of the things that we got from that was a pretty remarkable experience and service on the receiving end and on the giving end between me and my mom and my dad and me. But B, it brought my dad and I closer than ever. My dad is my hero. He has always been my hero. Because when my mom got sick, he not only worked restaurant hours, but took care of her every day, took care of me. He was a father, a mother, a businessman. And I say that because no matter what he did, there was, by the time I was 8 or 9, I just wanted to be like him when I grew up. Just so happened that the thing that he did ended up being something I fell in complete love with. I used to go to work with him on the weekends because if you have a parent that's in the restaurant business and you want to spend a lot of time with them, you kind of start going to work with them once in a while. And walking through the dining rooms of the restaurants he ran, or kind of the frenetic energy of the kitchens, was always electrifying to me. But then also seeing the extent to which, based on the food they were serving and the service they were providing and these beautiful rooms they designed, they were creating these magical worlds in a world that needed more magic. And I experienced firsthand on a couple occasions when my dad and I sat down in some of those rooms for dinner, the extent to which, when done thoughtfully and with intention, the rest of the world could melt away to the point where he and I were the only two people left in the world. And man, I was just hooked from a really early age. My dad is very similar to me, except in some ways he's a lot more intense than I am. Intention is everything to him. He likes goal setting. He likes, pursuing goals with profound vigor and intensity. And when I was about 12, he said to me, "Will, what do you want to do with your life? Come up with your 3 goals." And 2 of the 3 were that I wanted to go to Cornell to study hospitality management, and I wanted to own my own restaurant in New York City one day.
Hmm.
And so that's the beginning of the origin story, at the very least.
Will, your dad said adversity is a terrible thing to waste, and I wonder, and I don't want to put words in your mouth or assume anything, but the environment you created to pull people out of a very frenetic world, obviously culture in the last couple of years has been hard, really hard, and the fact that you're in the hospitality business makes me think about the creativity behind what you do to help people pull out of the traumas in their lives, the pains in their lives. Do you think some of the heartbeat that fueled you to step into this is because you heard your dad say adversity is a terrible thing to waste? Like, did he even frame that up for you? I just want to dive into that phrase because that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until later in life that he articulated it as such to me. But I watched him model that life perspective for years. And I want to be clear, like, what that means is, okay, we are all going to face adversity. We are all going to have challenges put in front of us. That is an inevitability. There's no controlling that. And in fact, if you never face adversity or there's no challenges, you're either in denial or you're just not doing anything, right? Like, that stuff will get put in front of you. You can't control that, but you can control the way you react to it. And that means that there's either opportunities for growth, for self-reckoning, for reflection, for education, all that stuff. But I'm always very careful when I talk about this, because what I never want it to come off as sounding like is that when something bad happens, you just need to brush it off right away and automatically look for the opportunity and what you can learn from it. I think that's unhealthy, actually. I believe in moments of adversity, it's not only appropriate, but responsible to give yourself the space and the grace to feel the weight of the sadness or disappointment or frustration. And once you've fully felt that, to then turn the corner. I saw with my mom that my dad never carried himself like the victim. And honestly, nor did my mother. And rather, they were always kind of very, very intentional about how, given our circumstances, how we could still live a life where we could connect genuinely with one another. And I just believe that in restaurants, in restaurants specifically, that's my experience, but I believe in any environment that's kind of built on a foundation of hospitality, there's this opportunity to help people, well, celebrate, right? Celebrate some of the most important moments of their lives, like give them like truly the opportunity to lean all the way into those moments, or give them the grace for a few hours to forget about some of the most difficult ones. And I think both of those things are important. And that can be done in a 4-star restaurant like the one I ran, but it can also be done, I mean, you can speak into someone's life across the counter of a rental car agency if you do it with graciousness and generosity and kindness and make someone's day just a little bit better. I get a little soapboxy when I start talking about that stuff, but hopefully the message is still well received.
No, Will, you can stay on the soapbox for all I'm concerned. Here's why, is because, this podcast is all about mental and emotional health, and I think one of the things we have to come to terms with in our own development, in relationships, in our own maturity, is serving people really well. And I think what you've done, what you did with 11 Madison Park and the business really just was this brilliant case study on serving people well with the motivation to give people an experience that lifts them and causes them to look almost up and say, I didn't know this was possible. Or I'm able to not think about, not in an avoidant type of way, but I'm able to let go of the pressures of my life so I can at least take a breather. I think about this little instance because I first came to know about you through the Netflix documentary, 7 Days Out. And there's this brilliant little scene in the documentary with you, and you're sitting in the booths and you're like, these are too itchy, they're too scratchy. And the level of detail that you put into this has to be right for the customer really inspired me, because what I saw you do is say, every bit of this moment has to be right, because I care about helping people breathe, enjoy. You want to talk about that? Like what drives you in that way? Because I don't see that too often in people, and I'm really inspired by that as a creative and as a detail-oriented person myself.
Well, it's funny, that show, 7 Days Out on Netflix, a lot of people reached out to me after they saw that show because it made them feel better about their OCD tendencies. and
yeah.
And what I'll say, if we're talking about mental health, and now I'm being sincere when I say this, I was always embarrassed about my like kind of, persistent, tenacious desire for every detail to be right. And it does go a little bit too far. Like in my home, if my wife parks the car a little crooked, I'll repark it. Or when she makes the bed, I'll remake it. Like I do need everything to be just right in order for me to focus on whatever it is I'm doing. Those are distractions to me. And I think when you're serving other people, you can only do it in the most connective, heartfelt, and genuine way when you are fully present. And for me, what that means is you control everything you can control. And you have all of the details that you can control fully dialed in and just right, so that when it comes time to engaging with other human beings, you don't need to worry about any of that stuff, and you can lean all the way in. Because being present, and being present is way overused these days as a concept, but for me, it just means caring so much about the thing you're doing or the person you're with that you stop caring about everything else in the world. And hospitality is about making people feel seen. It's about giving them a sense of genuine belonging. And I don't think that's possible unless you are completely dialed in to that moment that you have with them, every moment that you have with them. And so, like, I used to be embarrassed about the OCD tendencies until I got to 11 Madison Park. And when I reframed them as such, I learned that they weren't actually something to be embarrassed about. They were a superpower. Right. And I find that everyone has one or two of those things, the thing that maybe their friends rib them about or whatever. But if you can actually reframe your perspective to recognize that whatever it is that's made you that way, there actually is probably something about that could really help you thrive. And the moment you stop being embarrassed about something, but instead you start to feel proud of it, that's when like your true potential is unleashed and in a miraculous way. So I always encourage people that I meet when they're shy about this or embarrassed about that to try to reframe their perspective, because,
it's really rich. So for people to reframe their perspective on life and their personalities and quirks and the things that drive them, there's this emblematic brick wall in front of us, and it's called shame. It's called distraction. It's called comparison. How do you deal with that, Will?
Well, I believe the brick wall of shame is the thing that stands defiantly in the way of human connection, first of all. We talk about that all the time in hospitality, and I'm going to kind of take a winding road to answering your question, but one of the things I talk about a lot in hospitality is the concept of being right. When you're running a great restaurant, the thing that you don't want to do is make a mistake, right? Like, we're trying so hard to be so excellent, and the last thing in the world we ever want to do is make a mistake. And so this is the example I use a lot of the time for people. When I serve someone a steak, they ask for a steak medium rare, I give them a steak that's medium rare. the true textbook definition of medium rare is actually a lot more rare than some people think. And so I watched this happen in my own restaurant one time where a guest called over the server and said, I asked this for medium rare. This is rare. Could you bring it back to the kitchen and recook it? And the server, it was actually a perfect medium rare. The server didn't want the guest to think they had made a mistake. So they said, and by the way, with the best of intentions, well, sir, that is medium rare, but I'm going to bring it back to the kitchen and we'll cook it a bit more for you. So accommodating, he wanted to get the guests what they wanted. But in doing so, shamed the guests by saying they were wrong. By the way, if hospitality is all about breaking down boundaries so that we can connect, they had just rebuilt this wall in such a way where they were never going to break it down again.
Yeah.
And the idea of like creating connection with that guest was lost forever. And so we talk a lot in my business is like, hey, being right is irrelevant. Right? Like their perception is your reality. There's no reason to like, you don't need to worry about them making a mistake. All we need to focus on is the one thing that we're here to do, which is to make people leave happy. And so now I just gave you the guest facing answer to that question for a reason. We work so hard with such intention to make sure that we don't do something that will bring up the wall of shame for the people we are trying to serve. We need to work just as hard to make sure that we're not allowing our own wall of shame to go up, because both walls need to come down for us to connect with other human beings. And the reality is just because you aren't like someone else is not a reason to feel embarrassed about who you are. In fact, it's our myriad of differences that make us awesome. And, you know, like the only way for people to bring their fully realized selves to the table, and I say that metaphorically and literally, is as if they're just proud of who they are and all of our weirdness and insanity and imperfection. That is what makes us human beings. And if you're ashamed of something about you, and okay, let's put aside things that like maybe you're doing something in the absence of integrity, you're being disingenuous, and that is stuff you need to work on, right? But if you are so ashamed of something that you try to hide it from the people you're with, you're going to come across as insincere, and that will get in the way of you actually developing meaningful connection with the people you love, the people you're serving, the people you work with, the people you work for.
Well, let me go to a phrase from your book then, because I think you just sort of aimed the crosshairs at this statement from your book. Service is black and white, hospitality is color. Unpack that for us.
So
the ramifications of that are just so deep, and I'm curious.
Well, so I think far too often people conflate those two words. And in doing so, far, like they undermine the true power of hospitality. People use that word, in my view, incorrectly. They think of hospitality as like going to a restaurant and getting a nice meal, or going to a hotel and staying in a beautiful room. That's not hospitality. That's great service. Service is the thing you do. Hospitality is the way you make people feel when you do whatever it is you're doing. Service is, in a restaurant, it's bringing the right food to the right table at the right time, giving it to the right person, explaining it perfectly. Service is the tables being set perfectly, the tablecloth being ironed. That's service in a really nice restaurant. The wines being decanted, just so all that stuff, right? But service, in the absence of hospitality, is transactional. Hospitality is how much of yourself you bring to the relationship when you're serving that thing. It's the extent to which the person feels seen by you when you're putting that plate down. It's whether they feel that sense of profound appreciation. It's just so much deeper and so much bigger. And that's why I say, like, service is black and white, hospitality is culture, and the goal is to be in Technicolor. Like, it's to live in Technicolor. It's to give so much of yourself that you start to get so much back. Because I think the beauty of hospitality, when you kick it up a notch, when you make it unreasonable, is that as much as you give, you get at least that much, if not more back. I just don't think there's anything more energizing than seeing the look of complete and utter joy on someone's face when they receive a gift you are responsible for giving them. And I'm not talking entirely about a gift wrapped in wrapping paper with a bow, right? A gift can come in so many forms, and sometimes it's just being the person that served someone a steak and made them feel loved while you're doing it.
Yeah, that's powerful, Will. Okay, so people joining us, most of the people joining us probably aren't in the hospitality business specifically, but there is a reframe available about life and about relationships and serving others through what you said. I'd love to just drill down on this. So in any relationship, Will, what designates color from black and white? And then how do we do this?
So in any relationship, I mean, listen, I think all relationships operate on the same principles. I spend a lot of my time with my teams kind of sharing the same advice that one would hear at a marriage council couples retreat,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, and this is not new advice, right? But the way to have a great marriage is to pursue your spouse, to wake up every single day and choose to pursue them with a renewed energy. That's when a great relationship happens. It doesn't happen on accident. And I think that's the same case with the people we work with, the people we choose to serve, our friendships. For me, hospitality in a relationship is just pursuing other people with intention. It's being just as unreasonable in how we cultivate and foster and invest in relationships as we are in pursuit of whatever the thing that you're passionate about. If you're a musician, you're unreasonable in how you practice your instrument. If you are a big reader, you're kind of unreasonable in how many books you read, right? If you love to Netflix and chill, some people would probably say it's unreasonable how much time you spend on the couch. And so be just as unreasonable about how you pursue relationships. Because the difference is, like, people Netflix and chill or read a lot or practice an instrument because they're so passionate about those things that they get something for the energy that they give. I don't know that I've ever met anyone who, once they've given it a shot, is not, like, uplifted, has not had their gas tank filled when they invest in a relationship with someone else.
Passion, right? It's passion that drives it. It's not just transaction, as we talked about moments ago, right? There is passion that drives that. So what I hear you saying, Will, is that for us to deliver unreasonable hospitality in our relationships, for us to deliver over and above to the people who matter most in our lives, there has to be a passion for that person, to see them as they are and to value them for what they bring to the world.
Yeah, and I would even just say that it doesn't only need to be limited to the people that matter most in our lives. Like, if you are going to engage in a relationship with someone, why not just be a little bit unreasonable in your pursuit of that relationship? Otherwise, what's the point?
That's so good, Will.
Because the difference between relationships with people and an instrument or a sport or a book or a TV, right? These are all people that can invest in you right back, right? It's the most virtuous cycle available to us as human beings. And that's why I've chosen a life in hospitality, because of all the things I can think of giving so much of my energy to. Making other people happy makes me really happy. And honestly, like, if you're listening to this, there's a very, very good statistical likelihood that you're in the customer service business. And you have the opportunity to do that as well.
You know, it's so funny, Will. I was telling a friend of mine who cuts my hair, and I asked him, this was sort of just a deep dive question out of my own curiosity. I asked him, I said, what business are you in? And he said, what do you mean? I said, what industry are you in? What business are you in? He said, well, I'm cutting your hair. We're in the hair business. I said, no. I said, I actually think here's what you do, but the product that you're actually selling is hope. It's confidence. It's the ability for a person to walk into a meeting and feel like super fresh and professional and ready. I said, I think that's what you're selling.
I mean, I love that. One of the things I talk about in the book is the need for everyone, if you want to be great at what you do, to name for yourself why your work matters. Because, I mean, this is kind of like two of those ideas kind of brought into one. Adversity is a terrible thing to waste, and the idea that there's nobility in service. Like, there are going to be hard days. And if you don't believe that what you do for a living actually has the ability to positively impact people in some way, shape, or form, it's going to be really hard to get out of bed on the hard days and give all of yourself to the work. Like, you can be in the insurance business. You can sell people policies, or you can sell them the safety and security of knowing that their loved ones are cared for no matter what happens. Like, there is unbelievable nobility in selling insurance because you're giving people comfort that they will be able to take care of their families. You can be in the finance business. You can like open a bank account and manage someone's money, or you can help them prepare for a better future. You can be in the real estate business. You can sell them a house, or you can sell them a home. But one's capacity to actually have the wherewithal to understand why their work can actually positively benefit people in a meaningful and significant way, I believe is one of the gateways that stands between being good at what you do or being great at what you do. Because the moment you understand that there is real, profound impact, that's when your full potential is unlocked.
Okay, so Will, unreasonable hospitality is the remarkable power of giving people more than they expect. But I want to stay here. Let's get under the hood. What's in the power of that transaction? So based upon even what you just said, is it trust? Is it loyalty? Is it competency? Let's start in the context of maybe your industry and then zoom that out to life in general. What do we need to know?
Well, so the phrase, and maybe I'll just define kind of what I mean when I say unreasonable hospitality. 11 Madison Park, when I got there in 2006, it was a middling brasserie. By the time I sold it in 2020, it had been named the #1 restaurant in the world. To be clear, our food was unbelievably delicious, incredibly innovative. Our service was as gracious and as close to technically perfect as possible. And our dining room, I mean, Google it, like one of the most beautiful in the world. And it was because of those reasons that we were consistently on the list of the 50 best restaurants in the world. But it was our approach to hospitality that I believe earned us the #1 spot. It is not uncommon for people to be unreasonable in pursuit of the product they're selling. You look at, I mean, Elon Musk and Tesla. It's unreasonable that that car exists now. You look at Boeing. I mean, it's unreasonable. Like the unreasonable effort that all those engineers have put into such that we can now fly halfway across the world and watch Seinfeld along the way. Like, it's completely unreasonable how much work bands like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles put into writing their music. And that's how, like, in a music industry changing artists like that exist. My entire thesis is that it's time for all of us to be just as unreasonable in pursuit of hospitality, in pursuit of how we make other people feel. How that applied at our restaurant is that there were chefs all over the world celebrated for being unreasonable with what they put on the plate. And we decided to show just as much innovation, just as much creativity, just as much rigor in how we served those plates, such that the people that walked through our doors felt seen, felt a sense of belonging, felt welcome, all that stuff, and would go way above and beyond and do whatever it took to make sure that they left feeling that way. We had a position that we added to the restaurant. It was called a Dreamweaver. And the Dreamweaver's entire job was to help everyone else in the team bring wild ideas of unreasonable hospitality to life. A family of 4 from Spain was on vacation in New York, and I looked over and saw the kids looking out the window with wonder because the most amazing thing was happening, and it started snowing, and it was their first time seeing snow. The Dreamweavers somehow found a store still open at 8 o'clock on a Friday night selling sleds. They bought sleds, and when the family left, they were greeted by a chauffeur-driven SUV to take them in Central Park to go sledding at the end of their meal. Now,
no way.
Here's the deal. There's this quote by Maya Angelou. It's, people will forget what you do, they'll forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. There are restaurants all over the world, unbelievable restaurants serving unbelievably intricate, innovative, delicious plates of food, and you can serve someone something amazing, but that feeling when those kids were sledding in Central Park, there is no plate of food I could ever serve them that will make them feel that way, because nothing else that we serve would be so specific to them, would make them feel so seen. Now, that might be a bit extravagant, and I understand that not every business can do stuff like that all the time, but we had similar success with a $2 hot dog. Like, unreasonable hospitality is just where you want so badly for the people to have some sort of energizing, restorative experience with you or your brand, regardless what you're selling or how long the experience might last, that you will do whatever it takes to make sure that happens. And here's the great news. What I'm not asking people is to deplete themselves in service of others. I'm actually saying that pulling off these gestures, being generous towards others and giving them these kinds of experiences is actually the best way to not deplete yourself, but actually to energize yourself in a dramatic way. Because there are few things more addictive than seeing how happy someone is by an idea that you had. Going above and beyond for other people feels really, really good. And it's one of the most virtuous kind of exchanges that I know to exist.
Well, let's stay on the principle behind that, and I'll just kind of hit on Maya's quote. People will forget what you do. They'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So, Will, for you, top 2 or 3 personal priorities that enshrine that statement. Like, what are they, and how did you install them into your life?
Well, okay, as a leader of people, a manager of people, you're not always having uplifting conversations with people, right? Like,
so true.
Part of being, sometimes you need to fire people. Sometimes you need to write people up. Sometimes you need to tell people that they're not doing a good job. And I think remembering that no matter what the subject matter of an exchange is, that doesn't need to define what, like, the dominant emotion of that conversation. I think it's super important in life. Like, hard conversations don't need to be hard. Is this making sense? This is a great question. No one's ever asked me this before.
Well, thank you. Stay there. It is making sense, but I want to just keep peeling the layers of the onion apart. So take as much time on this as you'd like. I think there's really something powerful in this.
So it matters more how you make people feel than what you say. And so if I'm sitting down with you to say, you're fired, right? Or if you're in a relationship, you're sitting down with someone to say, I'm breaking up with you. Right? That doesn't mean that you need to make the person feel like crap in the process. And I found that when people are giving bad news or having a difficult conversation, they want to protect their themselves by staying so distant from the conversation that they don't feel the recourse of whatever emotion that other person is receiving, that they don't invest the time and the energy to do it in the way that they would hope other people would do it with them. Right? It's, I think, recognizing that at the end of a challenging exchange, there can still be a sense of connection, even if it comes with closure. Or I just think that's where hospitality comes in. It's about pursuing the relationship even at the moment that you're ending the relationship. You don't need to end something any differently than you started it or you pursued it. We're getting deep now. This is a deep conversation.
Which I so appreciate and love, Will, because again, this goes back to sort of the meta narrative where we started. There might not be a single person listening right now, though there could be, who is in the hospitality business, but the principles you're sharing will affect us. For an example, exactly what you just said. Hard conversations don't have to be hard, but when shame interrupts the narrative and shame wants to write the story, it says you can't be vulnerable. You have to self-protect. You have to self-promote, because neurobiologically we're wired to say, look out, the saber-toothed tiger's coming. I have to self-protect. I have to protect myself from being eaten alive. And what I hear you saying is, there is no saber-toothed tiger. The bark is bigger than the bite. Step through the discomfort. Folks, you're listening right now. You're in a difficult spot in a relationship. I want you to step through the discomfort into, Will, what I heard you say, the vulnerability to say, I see you as a person. This is a hard conversation. I know this feels yucky, but mutuality still exists.
Yeah.
Am I even hitting the right notes on that?
No, I mean, for sure. Vulnerability. I mean, we should talk about that in hospitality. Okay. Because I think it's kind of everything with hospitality, but like, yeah, I do believe that idea. Like, if you're really committed to pursuing relationships, you don't get to choose when you do and when you don't, based on when it's easy to and when it's not. And I think that's really the thing that I'm trying to get across. And that is, like, if you live your life with this hospitality mindset, honestly, it's when it's the least easy is often when it matters the most. Vulnerability. I mean, we were talking about shame as being the thing that puts the wall back up. Vulnerability is the thing that brings it down the most quickly. I'll give you a restaurant example. This was a funny one in some ways, but I went to a restaurant in New York City, and on the menu it said, "Don't tell us if you don't like anything or if you're allergic to anything. We don't change our dishes." Like, full stop. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so inhospitable. And at the time at my restaurant, we were asking people if they had any allergies, right? Every restaurant does that at a certain level. But like, not killing people, that doesn't feel like that's that much of a high bar. So I went back after that experience at that restaurant and decided that at mine, we were going to begin every conversation at the table by saying, is there anything you're allergic to? Or is there anything you don't like? Or is there anything you're just not in the mood to eat tonight? Like, we're going to work around it. Just tell us. We want you to have a great night tonight. That was very hard to get the chefs on board with, because it meant they had to have like endless permutations of every single dish available, right? Like, if you come in and you don't like mushrooms, you want the chicken, now the kitchen has to have an alternate preparation of the chicken with no mushrooms. Anyway, finally got them to go along with it. And we rolled it out. And after 2 weeks, I was completely convinced that it wasn't working, because not a single guest told us a single thing that they didn't like. I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm doing this awesome thing. So I decided to take a station in the dining room. Meant I was a server one night. By the way, I think that's a very powerful thing for any leader to do, regardless of what business you're in. When something's not working, just get in there and do the job and try to figure out for yourself why it's not working. And halfway through the night, I kind of had this realization, there's all these television shows where these chefs go around the world and they eat really weird stuff, like snake heads or like, fermented tofu and, now like sea urchin. Everyone eats that. And what I realized was people weren't telling us they didn't like something because they were at a fancy restaurant. It wasn't cool to say they didn't like something. And so finally, halfway through the night, I walked over to a table. I said, hey, is there anything you're allergic to? Anything you don't like? Anything you're just not in the mood to eat tonight? They all looked at me, crickets. And I said, okay, I'll start. I don't like oysters. I don't like sea urchin. And I really just don't like mackerel or sardines. Anything fishy, that's just not what I'm into. And they looked at me. And then the husband said, you know what? I don't like lamb. The wife said, I don't like celery. I needed to open up and be vulnerable to get them to open up and be vulnerable in exchange. Now, the reason I said it's kind of funny is because is saying that you don't like sardines an expression of vulnerability? Maybe not. But I gave them a bit of myself, and they gave me a bit of themselves in return. And so, yeah, if shame puts a wall up, vulnerability is the best way to take it back down, or to take it down in the first place. And the walls being down is if hospitality is connection, there is no chance of connecting if either wall is up. And so when you talk about intention and relational pursuit and that being kind of the foundation of hospitality, it's doing everything you possibly can to get that wall down as quickly as you can and keep it down. And that is when genuine connection takes place.
The pervading principle that I'm just so enjoying as I hear you talk, and I'm running a thread through this in my mind, your words from the book, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. These principles, Will, that you're sharing today, it's obvious that they're not just things that you check off a list. You're endeavoring to embody them in your marriage, in your role as a dad, to your employees, et cetera, et cetera. Back to the quote, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. That's so rich. What do we need to know about that?
Well, yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind when you say that. So, A, we're talking about vulnerability and service, right? And in establishing a relationship, showing vulnerability brings the wall down. I also think it's just as important in leadership, right? And, being able to criticize your team is super important. We all talk about how to affirm people. We don't spend nearly as much time talking about how to criticize people. And I think the best way to show someone that you care enough about them to take time to invest in them is to criticize them when they're doing something wrong, and they could actually use that as an opportunity for growth, right? And so normalizing feedback within an organization is so important because praise is crucial, but so is criticism, and normalizing it to the point where people are inclined to give it consistently and people don't get defensive when they have to receive it. But one of the best ways to get people to invite criticism from you is to be just as willing to criticize yourself. I don't think there are a few things as powerful as a leader standing up in front of their team and admitting to making a mistake and apologizing for that. And so that is vulnerability in a different type of relationship. I mean, my daughter is 18 months old. And different people who have a lot more experience with, brain development and toddlers could opine on this much more effectively than I could. I have no idea how much she understands when I talk to her or what's actually going on in there. But
yeah.
the other day, I brought her to the petting zoo. I went to take her out of the car. Right as I was reaching in to grab her, she threw up all over herself. And it was my first like real proper full daddy-daughter day. And I was like, okay, I got this. And took her out, started cleaning her up, cleaned out the car seat. And then I had her in the front seat of the car. It was just me with her. And I was walking back around to the back seat and smacked my head into the trunk that was open. And it knocked me on the ground. And I screamed out like a curse, not like of pain, just out of frustration. And I have no idea whether she even noticed it, but I went up to the front. I was like, hey, I want to apologize. I just did something that wasn't the right thing for me to do. Because she's going to do things. When she does something wrong, I'm going to call her out on it because I want her to be the best person she can possibly be. I'm not criticizing her to be a jerk. I'm criticizing her because I want her to have every opportunity, and that means I need to be just as willing to criticize myself. So the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. If you talk about vulnerability being the right way to engage other people in relationship, you can't pick and choose when to be vulnerable and when not to be. The other thing, when you talk about sitting on the banquette and the fabric being prickly on my back, if I've chosen to care deeply about details, I can't then just suddenly decide to not care about a detail. I think that, like, I'm not saying everyone should have OCD tendencies, right? I'm not saying everyone should care about that. But I think you need to decide what your non-negotiables are, what is important to you. And once you make that decision, you need to be consistent with it, because the best way to earn trust from people around you is for them to know what to expect from you. And that just means you need to be consistent. And so when you care about things, you need to always care about them. And if you don't care about something, you need to not care about that. Unless you choose to decide to change at some point, then you can. But I just think that trust requires consistency. People need to know what version of you to expect every day when you walk in to their lives, either through a door or over a Zoom screen, and that means, like, the way you do one thing, you need to do everything that way.
Trust requires consistency. We've touched on vulnerability. We've touched on shame. We've touched on really what it means to serve people well, to see them, to lift them up through the means of hospitality. But I want to go to something your dad gave you early in life. He said, run toward what you want as opposed to away from what you don't want. Want to teach that out a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. My dad is, as you've probably gleaned at this point, has given me a lot of life-changing advice over the years. There's been more than a few moments where I've been frustrated by something. Honestly, with a girlfriend and a job, playing a sport in high school. And in that frustration, I found myself making decisions. Basically living more in my fears than in my hopes. His whole thing has always been, don't make a decision based on the thing that you don't want. Like, give yourself the time to figure out what you do want and then make a decision, because, my gosh, every decision you make, you're either moving closer or further away. Closer to or further away from the place you want to be, and until you actually give yourself enough grace to, like, articulate for yourself what that is, it's going to be really hard to know you're moving in the right direction. I have people all the time that call me for career advice because they're struggling with where they work and they're not happy and they want to leave. And I always say, I share that it came from my dad, but, hey, stop marinating in your frustration. You have a job, you need to pay your rent, like, keep the job. And stop wasting so much time feeling upset about where you are. Decide where you want to be. And when you leave that job, you're not leaving that job because you're upset about that job. You're leaving that job because you have another one that you're going to. And that is so much more powerful when you're running towards something than when you're just running away from something. Because, like, just picture it in the woods. Like, if you're just running away from something, suddenly you are going to stop running. And you're going to have no idea where you are. If you're running towards something, when you stop running, you're going to be exactly where you want to be. And I mean, that's pretty clear to me where, given those two choices, which one I'd pick.
That's so rich, Will. I'd like to know, along with that, I mean, to the extent you're comfortable sharing, how has failure shaped you and then just focused you?
Failure sucks, right? Like, there's no way around it.
Yeah, it does.
Like, when you work really hard, you try to accomplish something and you fail. It sucks. But, and this goes back to the adversity is a terrible thing to waste thing. Yes, give yourself the space and the grace to feel whatever that failure makes you feel. And then get back up and keep on going. Failure, it's hard to say how has failure shaped me, because each failure I've had has shaped me in a different way. I've had moments where, like, one of the, like, my demons as a leader probably are most focused is my trying to navigate my relationship with control and my relationship with trust, where I'd like to think that I create cultures where the people who work with me are empowered and trusted to imbue the experience they're serving with a bit of themselves. And then there's those OCD tendencies, which make me want everything to be just so. And sometimes, I mean, those two things aren't friends, right? Like, sometimes I'll want something to go just exactly like I picture it, and I over-control how the people that work with me are meant to execute something, and in doing so, I'm actually not trusting them in the way that I want to trust them. And there was an experience at the restaurant where we introduced a new menu, and it was a very narrative-based menu where this menu was like telling the history of New York, and I wanted every story to be told just the right way, and so I literally made the team memorize a script. And a review came out a week after we launched the menu that said the words fail the dishes, basically saying the experience had been great, but the words ruined it. And that was a pretty personal failure, right? Like, I had been so fanatical in wanting it to be just so that what I'd done is turned the people in the dining room from just awesome people serving other people to actors, where they're just reciting someone else's words. And in doing so, I mean, that's not authentic. That's not connective. And so that failure,
right,
really, like, made me much more hyper aware of my need to really navigate the relationship between control and trust and my psyche and how I lead others. But man, there's been countless failures, and I think each one of them has helped me get better at something.
It's powerful. What are you most proud of, Will?
I mean, it's a cliche thing to say, but I had a healthy kid running around somewhere in this house right now, making noise. I'm sure that noise has seeped into this recording, and if it has, you're welcome.
I'm so thankful for it. This is real life, and I love it because it is a testament to me, Will. Just what I love about you is how genuine you are in this conversation, and I'm just thankful for it. I love, like I told you, I love hearing her in the background. I love seeing the dog just across your left shoulder. This is real life, Will, and I'm thankful for it.
No, I appreciate that. But I'm proud. I'm proud. I wonder if that's the right word. Maybe I'm talking about gratefulness right now. I'm grateful that I have an awesome... I'm proud that I got my wife to marry me because I'm punching way above my weight, and I'm thankful that she and I have an amazing daughter. No, you know what? I'll tell you what I'm proud of. This is what I'm proud of. My best friends to this day. There's Andy, there's Butch, there's Talik, there's Carlo, there's Kevin, Chris, Zach, Madison. I've known the people that I just mentioned. I met between the ages of 4 and 17. And they are all still my best friends. And they are all best friends with one another. I'm proud of the fact that in the midst of the craziness of life and success and failure and marriage and kids and COVID and careers, and that the people that have always been my best friends are still my best friends. And when anyone who's writing books about leadership and hospitality and relationship, like, you do need to check in with yourself and say, wait, am I actually like walking the walk here?
Of course.
And by the way, no one always is. We're humans. We make mistakes. Everything I talk about is aspirational. That's the person I want to be, and I'm generally there. But knowing that I've pursued those relationships enough where they're still such important parts of my life, I know I'm not a complete fraud. So I'm proud of that.
That's awesome. How did you and Christina meet? Just curious.
Well, you want to talk about unreasonable and pursuing people. I had a crush on Christina for a long time. My wife is a famous pastry chef. She has a chain of bakeries called Milk Bar. And I had never met her in person, but I always had a crush on her. And anytime I knew someone else that was going to either interview her or do an event with her, I'd always say, find out if Christina's single. And every time they'd came back and they're like, no, she's not. No, she's not. No, she's not. She had a couple long-term relationships before we met. And one time, finally, someone did. They're like, yeah, she's single. And I was like, whoa, okay, here we go. Like, I got to seize on the window while I have it. Let's go.
Yes.
And so someone came to us and they asked if they could do a charity event at my restaurant.
Wow.
And I said, yeah, you totally can. And it was like a guest chef dinner. I was like, here's the one thing, though. Like, I think Christina Tosi really needs to be the pastry chef for this dinner. That's the only way I could really. And so I got her to come to the restaurant and be the pastry chef. And
Will, let's go.
And it's another 30-minute story from there. But I seized on that opportunity. And 2 years later, we were married.
How long have you been married now?
I think we're at 6 years.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, she's great.
Okay, quick relationships advice then. You're obviously just so happy. Keep dating your spouse. How do you do it? You and Christina obviously live busy lives. What would you say to people listening, married, dating, just to keep a sense of flourishing in their relationships?
I think just what I said before. Every day, wake up and make the choice to pursue one another. It's that simple and it's that hard.
How often does Christina make crack pie at home?
She bakes a lot at home, and I'm very good at not eating all of it.
That's so good. Well, speaking of unreasonable hospitality, which is the title of your new book, which, folks, listen, you may not be in the hospitality business, but this book will enrich you in such a deep way. I've read it twice, actually. See, Will, from the first time we had a conversation, I read the book, and then I thought, I've got another month. It was so good, I'm going to read it again. So I read it again. And it's so good. And you know, speaking of unreasonable hospitality, you've been unreasonably generous with your time and just the affections of your heart in this conversation, Will, and I'm so grateful for it, and I'm just so thankful for you and the opportunity to just learn from you today. And I would love for listeners to stay connected to you as well. How can they do that?
I'm on Instagram at W Guidara. I have a conference called the Welcome Conference. We're also on Instagram. We also have a website with all the content we put up. It's one of the bigger hospitality conferences in the country. And eventually, in the next few years, I'll be opening a new magical world of my own. I can't wait to invite you all there.
Let's go.
Hey, man, it's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks,
the conversation with you is like a warm bath on a cold day. And
wow.
And I look forward to
That's
more
so
in the
kind.
future. Thanks for
I hope
having me
so
on.
too, Will. I hope you have an incredible day. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, buddy.